All right, welcome to another session of GLP's 10 out of 10. This is where we interview designers with the same 10 questions, have a little fun at some trying times here, and see what people's different answers are and compare some notes at the end. So with us today is Steve Lieberman of SJ Lighting. Steven is, without question, one of the best production and best known production designers for some of the very large festivals around the world. Everything from Lollapalooza, EDC worldwide, all of their events, Coachella, Ultra Music. Steven is a premier nightclub lighting designer. Vegas, Los Angeles, New York, you name it. He's an extraordinarily busy guy. And in a world far, far away, when Steven and I were both much younger men, I only ever once dropped a shackle out of the ceiling and almost took Steven's head off.
He did actually hit me. I think it was like a nut or a washer at the Roseland Ballroom, and he nearly knocked me out cold.
That's the only time it's ever happened. So really, really happy to have you here with us, Steven. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brian. It's good to see you. And that was some introduction. So when I need an agent to represent me, I think you might qualify.
The stuff that you put out is on a scale that most people cannot comprehend. It's impressive stuff, dude.
Well, I appreciate that. But going back to the day that you did drop that hardware on my skull, I don't think I knew which end of the cable got plugged into the console, let alone standing in front of it. So, I mean, we've known each other since the first day I stepped foot into the industry as this green, wet behind the ears kid that was just eager to learn and didn't have a clue what the hell was going on.
But you absolutely were there with the totally correct attitude in every way. And that was cool. Some fun times. Yeah, Doc. Okay, so let's get at this. So what was your first show as a designer?
I gave it some thought because, you sent me these questions to look at. And I can't actually pinpoint it, but I am certain it was an illegal rave somewhere. Like I've done, as a designer is when I'm trying to pick it up, but I've worked on lots of shows, from the early 90s until my first design probably wasn't until, 95 or 96, but it was a rave somewhere in either a warehouse or in the middle of nowhere, breaking in and stealing electricity and turning lights on. I don't remember what it was, but I'm sure I got in trouble for it.
But it was memorable.
Well, not that memorable, but they were all, back in those years when the rave scene was really hitting, and that's when, that's the industry that I was working in. They were just back to back to back. Yeah. We were doing, it could have been Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Right.
And wherever we can go, or even 2 shows in a night. So when we started doing it in those earlier years, it was blurry as to what was going on. It was just, load the truck, get it out. A lot of times, and this happens today, so and it shouldn't, but the gear goes into the truck and goes right to the next gig. So. We weren't big on prepping back then. I didn't even know what that meant. We weren't going with like the Light Right book and, figuring out cables and connectors and what we needed. I've had some interesting moments, hard lessons learned, ordering equipment and not putting all the back end of it in, thinking that the rental house would just give me all the correct cable. And then you show up with a pile of trash that you try to assemble something from.
But you made it work.
Didn't answer your question directly, but a dirty rave many years ago in another planet.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So coming riffing right off of that, what's the most Spinal Tap embarrassing moment on a show that you're willing to tell us about?
Sure. I've told this story, I've shared before throughout the years because it's one of those times where it was just so cliche. I was doing a show in the Dominican Republic. DJ Danny Tenaglia, for those who are dance music fans, probably know who Danny Tenaglia is. A very well-known producer, DJ from New York, still very relevant, performs regularly when we're not locked up. And he was performing at the show that we designed on the beach. And I'd been doing shows in the Dominican Republic for a few years at this point in time. And the producer had an 8-foot mirror ball that he had in his possession that for years he'd been asking me to use. So I was like, okay, well, this is a good opportunity to use this mirror ball. So I call him up. His name is Pablo. I go, hey, man, do you have this mirror ball available? He goes, yeah. I go, you have a motor for it, right? Because I'm not going to hang a mirror ball if it doesn't rotate. He goes, no, absolutely. And he had this deep, scratchy voice. Steve, we have this mirror. We have the motor. Don't worry. No problem. Everything in the Dominican Republic is either no problem or big problem, right? So I get down there, and we're setting the show up on the beach, and I ask him to see the motor. He's got it. I mean, they wheeled this thing over. I mean, the motor's this tremendous device. Never seen anything like it before. I go, great. So they build the show. They're working on it. This was the day before the show, so we didn't have a lot of load-in time. The day of the show, the production manager, this man named Marino, comes over to me and goes, Steve, we have a problem. And I go, what, Marino? The mirror ball motor doesn't work? He goes, the mirror ball motor doesn't work. I go, what's the problem? It's kind of a big problem. It's like the centerpiece of everything. He goes, don't worry about it. I have a guy coming down. He's going to fix it. I go, okay. So this guy shows up with an arc welder and like no other fucking tools. I go, what are you going to do with a welder? He goes, let me get up there and take a look. So to energize his arc welder, which I don't even know why we needed to do this, we needed to disconnect the generator from the entire rig. So I couldn't even program. So he climbs up on this Tomcat self-climbing roof, and he's up there for a little while, and he comes down and he looks at me. I go, what, you can't fix it? He goes, no, I can't fix it. I go, no shit. You brought an arc welder. You can't fix that. So Marino comes over and he goes, Steve, listen. He goes, tell you what, just tell me when you want the ball to spin, and I'll send a guy up into the roof and he'll spin it. I go, the fucking ball weighs like 2,000 pounds. Nobody's spinning it while laying on a piece of truss in the middle of the night. And I go, here's a cue when I want it to spin. How about all night? I want it to spin all night, like all the time, constantly. He goes, okay, well, that's a problem. So now I'm scrambling. I look around. Now, we're in the beach, Dominican Republic. You know, there's a 3-legged feral dog running around. There's everything that you would expect to be in a Caribbean island. So I see that we have like a 10-foot piece of like Schedule 40 pipe. And then there's like some iron stakes that they were using to stake some scaffold. So I look at my friend who owns the ball. And I go, do you care about this thing anymore? Like, is this thing a big deal? He goes, do whatever you got to do. So I go, grab that pipe, grab that stake. So they grab it, they bring it over, and I go, now get your welder. So I have them cut a hole in the bottom of the ball, and then they wedge the stake in the ball, and then they put the pipe on there, and I have him tack weld the pipe to the stake inside the ball. So basically you made a big lollipop.
Mm-hmm.
I go, okay, great. I go, now get one of your guys and get him a bucket, sit it right here and give him a pair of gloves. And I had one of our stagehands literally sit on a bucket going like this for about 14 straight hours, rotating this ball behind Danny Teneglia's back all night long while he DJ'd.
That's a MacGyver moment right there, man.
Oh my God. And actually at one point in time, the guy came up to front of house. He needed a break. I mean, these are raves. So they're marathon sets. He comes up to front of house. He speaks no English. And back then I had a hog too. I go, you want to run lights for a little bit? He goes, his eyes light up. I go, okay, hit these buttons, hit these faders. I go, give me those gloves. He goes, what? I go, give me the gloves. I'm going to go spin the ball a little bit. So I grabbed a beer and I went back there because I wanted to see what it was like. And after about 3 minutes, my forearms were like, I looked like Popeye the Sailor. And I was like, fuck this. And I walked back. I was like, you're done. Back on stage. We'll see you later. So
that's awesome.
Final tap.
There you go. And you had street cred because you spun the ball.
Gave me a little bit of street cred with one of my electricians.
There you go.
And I made sure that he was just fed beer all night.
That's a good move.
Yeah, it was a good move.
All right, so on to number 3. What's the best advice anybody's ever given you, professionally or otherwise?
Right. Okay. Well, I put a couple things down here. Mm-hmm. We'll start with like some of the basics of just being a human being. Be kind. that's advice that I would give to anyone. Professionally, if you're behind a console, save often. The data is your responsibility, and losing it or fucking it up is not a reasonable excuse. Doesn't matter what happened, short of a nuclear missile striking your house, the console, and everything around you, and we're all gone. That's yours. And I remember when I first started working after college, my old man told me to be a sponge, absorb everything you can, learn everything you can. And then the last person who I'll never forget, and this is, if we have any listeners that are old school New York nightclub people, one of my close friends who passed away a long time ago, his name was Arthur Weinstein. Do you remember Arthur? Mm-hmm. So Arthur was old school nightclub owner, lighting guy, worked at all the Peter Gatien venues, Studio 54. He owned a club called The World, Jefferson, After Hours. And he would tell me, amongst probably other people and some other interesting comments that he would make, kid, you don't have any friends. Now, he didn't mean that I didn't have any friends, but he just meant that you're out here in the world doing your thing on your own, and to be sensitive about who you're mixing it up with and how you are interacting, and understand that really ultimately in the professional world, you trust yourself first. So that would be kind of like a short list of advice that's kind of stuck with me through the years. I do remember Arthur actually saying it, when I said something, my friend, he's going to take care of it. And he goes, kid, you don't have any fucking friends. You got to take care of it. I was like, okay, like I hear what you're saying. I mean, you don't have to be a dick about it, but yeah.
It was the way though.
Yeah, it was his way.
Yep, that's good. Okay, so on a professional level, what's your proudest achievement?
It's kind of a broad stroke there. I'm very proud of where I am today in the industry. My friends and colleagues that I've known throughout the years, new and old, and building a company from literally less than zero. Actually, the first business that I owned, I started with a friend of mine who had already started it, and I basically ended up in debt because I went to my accountant with this entity that I signed my name on. He goes, you dumbass. You now owe all the taxes that he didn't file from last year with no business to do. So literally built my professional career from a negative situation and have, built it to where I am now with a lot of fortitude and determination. So I would say that's my proudest moment. As far as like design work and things like that, it's like saying which one of your children do you love the most? I love them all. They all have a special place, most of them. But I'd say the overall place where I am now in the industry I'm very proud of it, and I'm proud to be a part of it with everybody else who's in it. That we all kind of support each other, and especially now during this pandemic and this quarantine time, for all of us to be supporting each other and trying to develop new methods to deliver products to an audience, whether it's live streaming or 3D environments or just whatever it takes to get out there. It's a special place to be. And whilst our industry is hit the hardest through all of this, we are a very determined, stubborn bunch of people. And I know when we come out on the other side, we'll be stronger than we were when we came into this. So I have a lot of sense of pride when it comes to that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And you deserve it very, very much so, I must say. So being an extremely busy, and when we're not in quarantine, world traveling type of a guy, what do you do in your downtime?
Well, just before I even answer that, for those of us in the industry, typically we fly 100 to 200,000 miles a year. And the last time I was on a commercial flight was in February going to Mexico. And, I think I've been executive platinum on American Airlines for like 15 plus years. They actually called, like, are you okay? Hopefully, business will pick up and you'll start flying soon. I'm like, I'm in entertainment, probably not going to happen. But it's crazy that all of a sudden now, those of us who are used to being on a plane every week, every other week, like I've been home for 100 days. But to get to Downtime from there, I do like to fly. So I am a pilot, as you know, and I own a small aircraft, so I enjoy doing that. So I use that for business and for pleasure. So I can get anywhere regional, from San Francisco to San Diego, Las Vegas, and anywhere in between. And I play golf a couple days a week, and I'm a mountain biker.
Awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So in the travels that you've done, in the shows that you've done, what's the best venue that you've worked in?
You know, every venue that I've spent time in, they all have different meaning for me, you know, and best doesn't mean craziest lighting system. It's just something that maybe had impact on me throughout my career, throughout my life. So the first one that came to mind is a place where you and I first met, even before you dropped that hardware on my head, was at Webster Hall, right? So Webster Hall meant a lot to me because it's where I met a lot of people in the industry. I met yourself, Jim Gerbig, who I worked for back in the day in New York. Tony Perez and I worked in there together. And when I lived in New York, I was one of the LDs in the Grand Ballroom. So that room has meant a lot to me over the years, although I have not set foot in the place in a decade more or more. When I think back about my career and the places I've been and the places I've worked, that place stands out. Then there's other venues, you know, another New York venue that stands out for me, Crowbar. When we did Crowbar in New York, that was just one of those nightclubs that just kind of really changed the landscape of nightclub culture. So that's left a legacy. Marquee in Las Vegas and maybe Live in Miami. I would say those are top four as far as influential on my career, whilst there's a lot of other venues that have been tremendous, and I apologize for not rattling them all off. Those places, like, literally just, they come right to the front when I think about most influential.
Webster Hall is a good one too, because the bones
Webster Hall is a great venue.
Awesome.
And there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us who that place has touched, you know, especially during the Ballinger years, right? You know, it touched you, it touched me, it touched Tony. And then, you know, there's 2 or 3 guards that have gone through since then, 4 or 5 guards that have gone through. So there's a whole other, like, community of people in our world that Webster Hall's done something for them. And we are a decade or more apart in our tenure there, right? You know, and our own experiences with Steve and Mama and Lonnie and Doug and the whole Ballinger clan, and being in that building. That building was pretty special, and I've explored every inch of that place. So it's just one of those nightclub kind of anomalies. You can't purpose build a venue like that anymore. So all these new clubs that come up, that come out of the ground, while they're fantastic and have great design aesthetics, they could never offer the personality of a venue like Webster Hall.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty cool. You also have a very unique privilege in that you get to create your own venue many times over on your large scale festivals. So that's pretty cool too.
It is, you know what? It is absolutely a privilege and an honor when a client has enough faith in you, and I'm sure all the other designers out there would agree, you know, that they give us the latitude to express ourselves creatively and really put forth a design and an aesthetic, and then deliver a show based on what we think is appropriate. You know, whether we're following the rules of theater or we're just winging it and doing some other, you know, avant-garde style, you know, display, we have somebody who is willing to back us when it comes to that. And that is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty special. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So in this moment of sort of lockdown, you know, some of that's letting up, but during the whole quarantine, what's the one album or artist that you couldn't live without?
You know, I don't binge necessarily on an album. Spotify has been the most fantastic application since my musical journey. So I have playlists of genres that I like. So it just depends on where I am during the day. You know, for those who know me personally, I've always been a dance music fan. So I've never been in festivals, like dance music festivals and nightclubs, because I couldn't get a job anywhere else. You know, it's because I wanted to be there. I'm a fan of the music. I enjoy that culture and that style, and and all of it that goes with it. So I can't tell you, I mean, I can give you specific songs, but they're not albums, you know, so my kids laugh because I torture them with techno, like dark techno. So typically while I'm out in the backyard and I'm barbecuing, I play techno, and I have my wife is not a real big techno fan. So my playlist is actually, her name's Michelle. I call her Mish. So my playlist is called Mish Loves Techno. So it's all my favorite songs, like currently. And she usually rolls her eyes every time it comes on, and my daughter will too. So while I'm barbecuing, it's techno. But then when we transition over to actually sitting down and eating, whether it's inside or outside, it's usually more like Frank Sinatra, you know, more crude style stuff. But to be honest, I love everything, short of like going into chamber music or like free jazz, which isn't music to me. I just enjoy music. So country, western, I mean, you can see behind me, you know, we got the king of rock and roll right there. Elvis Presley is a safe channel, and right next to the Elvis Presley channel is the Studio 54 channel. So, you know, it's a pretty wide spectrum for me.
That's cool. That's cool. If you could go back in time, this is question number 8. What advice would you give a teenage version of Steve Lieberman?
Well, if I could cheat, I'd say buy Google stock, right? Run a hedge fund, save for retirement, but invest and enjoy, right? So you have to be able to balance those two things. You know, when you're young and you get into the industry, whatever industry you get into, you're untouchable. Nothing can hurt you. You know, there's no cares in the world. You can fall on your face 1,000 times. It doesn't mean anything. You know, you get into an industry 20, 30 years later and you start going, well, I could have done a few things different. So if I could have added just maybe a little bit more balance back into my overall philosophy and paradigm back then, I would do that. I'm not sure any teenager or young adult is going to take that advice, but that would be, you know, something that I wish I could have had a little bit more foresight as a younger person, maybe to, you know, even just stretch a little bit and buy a little bit of real estate, or just, you know, a little bit more things to stabilize the rest of the path ahead.
Right.
I've been blessed since to have found myself in my career and have found some success. So I'm able to stabilize some things, but it's not easy. And if you can do it earlier on, that would be a more ideal situation. So I'm going to hopefully be able to help my children as they get older to kick their ass into shape as they move along. And I think they've seen, you know, their mother and myself kind of work on those things throughout their lives as well.
Awesome. That's great advice. And I'm sure he would listen. Yeah,
right. You haven't met them.
Yeah. So if you could sit down for coffee with one person, present, you know, living present or past, who would it be?
Right. Every time you've asked for one, I have yet to give you just one. I keep giving you a couple. So
it keeps it interesting, man.
Right. So I'm going to give you a couple because my personality is so OCD that I can't be in one place for too long anyway. So everyone on my list, unfortunately, is not on the planet anymore. Not that it doesn't mean that there aren't living people that I find intriguing, that I would love to sit with. But for design, I've always been a very, very big fan and fascinated and intrigued by the work of Zaha Hadid, the architect. Her work has always been like next level for me, like the deconstructionist style, avant-garde, curvilinear details. I've always been a fan of, you know, artwork, whether it's, you know, modern or classical or whatever it may be. So Michelangelo, couldn't imagine what that conversation would be like. He'd probably be like, you're here, I'm here, you can't talk. And then moving maybe into some more current day things that have influenced my career, because I've always been a nightclub fan and fascinated by that culture. Part of the reason I still do this would be like a Andy Warhol and a Steve Rubell. So I'm assuming most people know who Steve Rubell was, but he was Ian Schrager's partner and one of the owners of Studio 54, and just a very eccentric club owner type person. And then if I could sit down with my grandfather again and talk to him about where I am now, that would be cool. I only got to meet one of my grandfathers, biological grandfathers, so he's the one I'm talking about. Although I would have loved to have met my other grandfather as well, not leaving him out. But my grandpa, like, we had a very close relationship. If I could get him back for a minute to say, hey, Grandpa, let me tell you about my life and what's going on, that would be really cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Very good. So, all right. So our final question, Steve. So your country's called you, man. The Olympics are coming. Winter or summer, what sport are you going to step up and be in?
Is spectating a sport? If spectating is a sport, I'm a gold medalist.
There you go.
When it comes to this kind of stuff, I've always considered myself athletic. But you say the word Olympics and you put it in there, you feel like a jackass saying, I feel like a jackass saying any sport at all. But the ones that, I'd at least be able to not even be competitive, but at least not die. I guess I would be snowboarding or, probably just snowboarding, I guess, when it comes to the Olympics. And even then, last place, against these kids that can do the craziest things ever. Actually, snowboarding, I found out about 5 years ago, I had an injury in my lower back, and it pinched the sciatic nerve, which, if anybody's ever had that injury, when you say sciatica, you've heard sciatica your whole life, and it doesn't mean anything until you have it.
Yep.
And then it was one of the most devastating injuries I've ever had, because it pinched the nerve so hard that actually my left leg from the knee down was numb for like 9 months. And I went and had all of this physical therapy, decompression table and all that stuff. And eventually I went and had an MRI. And when I had the MRI, the results came back, and I was with my doctor, and he's like, you fractured your spine. I go, I did? He goes, yeah, about 20 years ago. It looks really old. I go, I know exactly when that happened. And it was snowboarding. I hit a jump. I was actually with Tony Perez. I hit a jump, went upside down, landed flat on my back, and broke that fucker. So, ouch. Obviously, picking me for the Olympics even in snowboarding is probably not a great choice. But at least I have the balls to go for it.
There you go. There you go. That's awesome. Well, thank you, man. Thanks for spending the time with us. Thanks for sharing.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And again, thanks for the positive vibes, dude.
We're fighting the fight. Stick with it.
All right. You got it. Be well, Stephen. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Take care.